Hey friends, it's Dana Shay, and welcome to Real Relationship Talk. If you have not watched the intro video to this series on the 5 relational enemies, I want to encourage you to go back and watch the intro video so that you can have a good context of where we're going. So if you watch that first video, you know that we talked about these 5 relational enemies, and of course there are more, but there are 5 that I'm going to focus in on. And those enemies are apathy, comparison, unforgiveness, fear, and shame. We're going to dig deep into each of those enemies in 5 consecutive videos. So let's go ahead and jump into this one today. The word apathy. Now, that's not necessarily a word that many of us use on a day-to-day basis, but it is a word that all of us are familiar with in some way, shape, or form. So the word apathy simply means without feeling. And, relationships are all about emotions. We don't believe that they are necessarily contingent upon emotions, meaning you don't have to feel in love in order to have a loving relationship, but you can't just extract emotions from a healthy relationship. It's needed. They are needed. And one of the things that we tend to do when we've been hurt is we tend to build walls. And your walls look different than my walls. So there are several reasons why apathy can happen in our relationships. One of them is that we tend to, like I said earlier, we just tend to be disappointed. Maybe you've been in a relationship and it's just been going so bad for so long that you're like, I just don't even care anymore. That's usually what happens. Other times, though, we might become apathetic in our relationships because we're just dang bored. Being married for 20 years, we have to continue to be very intentional about keeping our marriage alive, keeping it fun, keeping it vibrant and healthy. If you're not intentional about doing those things, it's very easy to slip into a marriage that becomes routine, that becomes bored, and this is where you get too comfortable with each other. I always encourage couples, be comfortable. I mean, that person should be your safe place. Your spouse should be like the person that you are most comfortable around. But you also have to guard yourself about being too comfortable, about, not trying. So several years ago, I came across this concept called the love bank. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So in marriage, and really in any relationship, we all have what is called a love bank. Love banks are our accounting mechanism for how people treat us and how we receive love. So let's take my marriage relationship. In my love bank, Sean, who's my spouse, has the potential to make withdrawals into my love bank or to make deposits into my love bank. Just like a regular bank account, the more deposits you have, the healthier that bank account is going to be. If you're always withdrawing and you're not putting back in, then you're going to be overdrawn. You're going to feel depleted. And this is what leads to apathy. So how do you make deposits into your partner's love bank? Well, number one, you need to find out what their love language is. Because if you guys have read the book, which if you haven't, you need to get that book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Smalley. So you need to find out what your spouse's or your partner's love language is, and then you need to be intentional about making deposits into that love bank. For me, I'm a huge quality time and words of affirmation girl. So if Sean writes me a note just telling me how great of a wife I am, how great of a mom I am, that goes a long way. Those are major deposits in my love bank. If he takes off work and takes me out somewhere unexpectedly, that is huge. I love quality time. And so those are ways that he makes deposits into my love bank. Now, if he decides that he is going to hang out with his friends instead of going out on our planned date night, what do you think is going to happen? That's going to make a huge withdrawal from my love bank. So if you're feeling depleted because your spouse or your partner have constantly been making withdrawals and they're not taking the time to make deposits, that a lot of times, my friends, is going to lead to apathy. This is one of the biggest enemies of your relationship. It's almost like a silent killer because you don't realize that it's ebbing away at the love, at the very fiber of your relationship. I talk to couples a lot who say things like, we're doing all right. We don't have any major things happening in the relationship. I mean, it's not great, but it's not terrible. We're just okay. That is apathy. You need to always be thinking about, where are we at? How can we do better? What can we celebrate? Because sometimes it's not always about coming up with something to do better, but it's at least taking the time to celebrate where you are, not really getting into this place of let's just coast. Because you guys have maybe heard me say this on other videos, drifting is inevitable in marriage. Drifting is inevitable in a relationship. If you put a canoe out on the water and you leave it unattended, if that thing is not anchored into something, it is going to drift. And that is exactly what happens in marriages, is that if you are not intentional about your relationship, you are going to drift apart. And what happens time and time again is that couples end up drifting apart, and then they become apathetic. So instead of going after the marriage and going after connection, they remain disconnected. So that's the bad news, okay? Now let me give you some good news. If you find yourself becoming apathetic, or if you know that your marriage, maybe your spouse has become apathetic to your relationship, these are some quick tips that you can do. So the first thing that you want to try to figure out is, why are you feeling like this? Are you disappointed? Are you just too comfortable? Is there maybe some unforgiveness, which we'll talk about on another video? All of these kind of reasons, or all of these types of issues can contribute to the fact that you are feeling apathetic about your relationship. So if you can figure out the cause of it, then you'll be able to know the solution. The second thing is, you want to try to turn your apathy or your passivity into a problem-solving situation. So, for example, you don't want to try to tackle this whole mountain like, oh my gosh, our relationship is terrible. Let's try to come up with 12 solutions in one day. But maybe you can just go on a date, okay? Maybe you guys, if you start looking at, why am I just feeling this way? Why do I not really care about our relationship anymore? Maybe it's because y'all just aren't spending enough time together. So think about, what can we do now to combat that? Can we go out? Can we just go out and do something fun? Just one little solution to kind of break you out of that passivity. The third thing that you want to try to do is, you want to try to think about what makes you come alive as a person. Because one of my friends says all the time, there's no such thing as marriage problems. She says there's only childhood problems that manifest themselves in marriage. And I'm like, whoa, that's huge. So a lot of times you're feeling apathetic about your marriage because you're really feeling apathetic about yourself. The way that you feel about yourself is going to translate into how you operate in your relationship. I mean, that's just inevitable. So what makes you come alive as a person? When I'm feeling alive and when I'm feeling filled up, then I can be a better wife. I can be more engaged in my relationship. So you might just want to take the time to say, am I working too much? When's the last time I've done something for myself? Ask yourself those questions, because that, my friend, might be a big indication on why you are emotionless in your marriage, because you're not treating yourself with the level of care that you deserve. Lastly, there are times where you might need to see a counselor. I am a huge believer in marriage counseling. It has helped Sean and I tremendously. We have spent years in marriage counseling, and we still go back for tune-ups. Just like if you have a nice car and you want to keep that car rolling the way that it's supposed to roll, you need to do your maintenance. You need to do your tune-ups. You need to make sure that you're still good. And so we believe in going for a tune-up every now and again, just to make sure that we're okay. Sometimes if you just can't shake it, maybe this apathy has gone deeper than just the surface level. Maybe you're going through a depression. You're contemplating harming yourself or breaking up your marriage. You need to see a professional counselor, so that someone who is objective outside of your situation can look and kind of help you to diagnose what the problem is and get you back on the right track. Quick story before we go. So Sean and I had gone through this very crazy cycle for many years of our marriage where we were not treating each other well. There was all kinds of crazy drama going on. We just weren't taking care of each other. We had started taking each other for granted. And I got to a place where I just did not care. I didn't have feelings either way. I wasn't upset about it anymore. I wasn't trying to fix it. I wasn't sad. I just didn't care. And I think that was probably one of the most depressive seasons of my life, not because of what was going on, but because of my response to what was going on. I just didn't have any fight in me left. And I know that I'm speaking to some of you who you just feel like you have no more fight in you left. And I understand, I have been there. I know that it is hard to re engage when your heart has been broken so many times, when you feel like nothing is going to change. You've tried the counseling, you've tried this, you've tried that, and it doesn't seem like anything has changed. I understand what that's like. But there's one thing that I think has helped me in my marriage, and it's that I've always had hope. No matter how bad it got, no matter how horrible I thought our situation was, there's always this like little glimmer, this little seed of hope that I knew that things could get better. So until you get the courage to go to counseling, until you can actually identify maybe where your apathy is coming from, I want to encourage you, try to have hope. Try to have hope. Understand that things are not always going to be this way. Marriages don't work, people do. You guys have heard me say that before. Marriages don't work, people do. So if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to try again, if you're willing to love again, if you're willing to uncover the reasons why you have grown apathetic, your marriage can become vibrant again. It can become the relationship that you are destined to have. So that wraps up video number 1. Come back for the next video where we are going to talk about comparison. Comparison is the thief of all joy, and we're going to talk about how that rears its ugly head in marriage and in relationships. So be sure to tune in to this next video. If these videos are encouraging you, also be sure to share them, and of course be sure you are following me at The Real Relationship Talk on Facebook and Instagram, and on YouTube. Be sure that you are subscribed to this channel and have your notifications on. Be sure to also visit my website, realrelationshiptalk.com/resources, while I have a free audio download for you called The 7 Things I Wish They Would Have Told Me Before I Got Married. I'd love to share that with you. I spent a lot of time putting that together. I think it's going to bless you a lot. So I will see you all on the next video. Take care. Bye.